The way I understand the Bible, if somebody, no matter what country you're in, you ought to be thankful to the Lord that you're in that country. No matter what country you're in. And listen, the most wonderful thing about living in America is if I can have fellowship with the Lord Jesus. Okay, Daniel chapter 11. Daniel wrote this. He wrote it about the year 500 BC. And now, and when he was writing this, he was in the first about 35 verses of this chapter, he was writing about things that would happen in about 200 or 300 years after he wrote it. The first 35 verses of this chapter all happened before Christ was born. And now, when you study this chapter, and when you study what happens in history, you say, wow, God knew all of that? Yes, God did know all of that. And God understands the future. And God knows the future. Now, okay, the way, when we say God knows everything, God is omniscient. He knows everything. Now, the way I interpret that is that about the future, God knows everything that can happen. Like when God created Adam and Eve, it's not that God knew they was going to sin. He knew they could sin. And if they sinned, he had a plan what to do. And they did sin. And so when they sinned, it wasn't like it says, well, what can I do? No, God knew exactly what to do. He knew that because they sinned, he was going to send his son, Jesus, into the world to pay for their sins. And now, here, God is telling, through the angel unto Daniel, he's telling them what's going to happen. From the point of Daniel, he's telling what's going to happen in the next couple hundred years. And that is exactly how history says it happens. Now, okay, I'm going to divide this up into different parts. The first part is just the first 4 verses. Now, in the first 4 verses, he's explained that there's going to be, when Daniel was writing this, the Persians was in charge. And he says there's going to be 4 more kings in Persia. And then the 4th king is going to cause trouble over in Greece. And then there's going to be a mighty king rise up from Greece. We know that's Alexander the Great. And he's going to make a great empire. And then when he makes his great empire, he's going to die. And when he dies, his empire will be divided up into 4 parts. And that's exactly, okay, now this chapter does not mention the name Alexander the Great, but in verse 3 it says, a mighty king shall stand up. And just before that it says, against the realm of Grecia, that's Greece. And out of Greece a mighty king stood up. Okay, now just watch me as I try to say these first 4 verses. Now, okay, this took place in the first verse. Daniel stood up to help the emperor right there. He stood up and prayed and was praying for the emperor. And it says, also I, in the first year of Cyrus, also I, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to strengthen, to confirm him. And now I will show the truth. Behold, there shall arise yet 4 kings in Persia, and the 4 shall be far richer than they are. And by his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. And there shall stand up a great king that shall rule with great authority. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken, and it shall be divided toward the 4 winds of heaven. Not toward his posterity, nor according to the dominion which he ruled, for his kingdom should be broken up even for others beside him. Now in this next part that we're going to listen to, it's about the king of the north and the king of the south having battles. Now the king of the north, as we understand it, it would be the king of Syria. Alexander the Great was divided up into 4 empires. And the one of the north, we would think of it as Syria. That's the king of the north. And the king of the south, that's the king of Egypt. Now, to help you understand it, when I stand down here, I'm talking about the king of the south. And when I stand up here, I'm talking about the king of the north. Now, okay, did you ever hear of the person called Cleopatra? Okay, actually, Cleopatra is mentioned in this chapter in verse 17. And he, the king of the north, shall set his face to enter in with the strength of his whole kingdom, and upright ones with him. Thus shall he do, and he shall give him the daughter of women. Okay, the king of the north, the king of Syria, was going to give the king of the south his daughter. Her name was Cleopatra. The Bible doesn't say that name, but that's who it is in history. He was going to give Cleopatra, his daughter, to the king of the south. And he taught his daughter, listen, when you get on his side, when you marry him, I want you to be on my side. But you know what? When she married him, she forgot about her father, and she stayed true to her husband. Man, that made them all upset. But nevertheless, the things that happen in this chapter that we're listening to, it's a battle between the king of the north and the king of the south. And now, watch me as I try to say it. And the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes with him, and he shall be strong above him, and have dominion, and his dominion shall be a great dominion. And in the end of years they shall join themselves together. For the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. But she shall not retain the power of the arm, neither shall he stand, nor his arm. But she shall be given up, and they that brought her, and he that begat her, and he that strengthened her in these times. But out of a branch of her root shall one stand up in his estate, and shall take a great army, and enter into the land of the king of the north, and war against him, and prevail. And shall also carry captive into Egypt their gods, with their princes, and with their silver and gold. And he shall continue more years than the king of the north. So the king of the south shall come into his country and return into his own land. But his sons shall be stirred up, and shall set forth and shall assemble a great multitude, and one shall certainly come and overflow and pass through, and he shall return and overflow, and he shall return and overflow and be stirred up and be stirred up even to his fortress. And the king of the south shall be moved with choler against him, and shall come forth to fight with him, even with the king of the north. And he shall set forth a multitude, and the multitude shall be given into his hand. And when he has taken away the multitude, his heart shall be lifted up, and he shall cast down many, 10,000, but he shall not be strengthened by it. For the king of the north shall return into his land, and gather and set forth a greater multitude, and shall certain come at a certain time with a great army and much riches. And in those times there shall many stand up against the king of the south, and also the princes shall and also the and also the robbers of the people shall to establish a vision, but they shall fall. So the king of the north shall come and set up a mound and take the most fenced cities, and the king of the south shall not withstand him, neither his chosen people, neither shall there be any strength to withstand him. For he that cometh against him shall do according to his will, and none shall stand before him, and he shall stand in the pleasant land, which by his hand shall be overthrown. And he shall set his heart to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom, and upright ones with him. And this shall he do, and he shall give him the daughter of women corrupt in her. But she shall not stand on his side, neither before him. After that shall he turn his face towards the isle, and shall take many. But a prince for his own behalf shall cause a reproach after him, but to cease. Without his own reproach, it shall turn upon him. And then shall he turn his face to the ford of his own land. And he shall stumble and fall, and not be found. Then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom. But within few days he shall be broken, neither in anger nor in battle. And in his estate shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the glory of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatteries, and with an arm of a flood he shall overflow from before them, and shall be destroyed. Yea, even the prince of the covenant. And after the league were made with him, he shall work deceitfully. For he shall come up and shall become strong with a small people. But with he shall become strong with a small people. And he shall enter peaceably, even upon the fattest places of the country. And he shall do that which his fathers hath not done, nor his father's father. And he shall scatter among the spoil and the riches, and yea, and he shall forecast his devices against the fortress, even for a time. And he shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south. And the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army, but he shall not stand. For they shall forecast devices against him. Yea, they that feed of the portion of his meat shall destroy him. And his army shall overflow, and many shall fall down slain. And both these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief. And they shall speak lies at one table. But it shall not prevail, for yet the end shall be at the time appointed. And then he shall return to his land with great riches, and have indignation against the holy covenant, and do exploits, and return into his own land. Now, this next part, let me explain it. Verse 29 through 32. Okay, this is talking about, there's a man in history called Antiochus Epiphanes. And he goes down to fight Egypt with a big army. And he could easily whip them. But when he gets down there to Egypt, the Romans are down there. And he's no match to the Romans. And he's standing there in the sand, and the Roman senator comes up to him and says, listen, if you fight the Egyptians, you can have all of Rome fighting you. Now you have to decide, are you going to fight the Egyptians or not? And he said, can you give me time to make the decision? And the Roman, he was standing in the sand, and the Roman senator took a stick and made a circle in the sand around him. And he says, you can take as long as you want, but when you step out of that circle, you've got to tell me the answer. And if you don't tell me you're leaving, then all of Rome is going to fight you. He was really upset. I mean, this humiliated him. So, he decided, I'm going back home. And on the way back home, he goes to Jerusalem. And all of his anger he takes out on Jerusalem. And that's what it's talking about here in verse 30. For the ships of Kittim, in verse 31. No, verse 30. For the ships of Kittim, that's Rome, shall come against him. Therefore he should be grieved. He was really upset. And return and have indignation against the holy covenant. He was going to take it out on the city of Jerusalem. So shall he do. He shall even return and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. Now there in Jerusalem they had the temple worshiping the Lord. But what he did, he went and found some of the people in Jerusalem that was, they would so-called worship the Lord, but not in their hearts. And he would come and say, listen, why don't you be on my side? Open up the gate to me. I'll give you all these nice rewards. You know, there may be people right here in this room. The devil says, man, he's going to be on my side. I mean, he comes here to chapel all the time, but I know he's on my side. Okay, let me tell you. It was a Halloween night. And these two men, they was dressed up like the devil. They had horns and a pitchfork and a pointed tail and a red costume. And they really looked like the devil. And they forgot the address of where the Halloween party was. And they say, well, we'll walk down the street, and when we see a building with a light on, that's it. So they walked on. There was a church there. They thought that must be it. They walked in. There at the back door. And the preacher, man, he turned all kinds of pale face, and he ran out the back door. And everybody looked back. They saw the devil. They screamed and ran out. They were jumping out the windows and everything. Well, these two people with the devil costume walked out. There was this one lady, and she was stuck in the chair. She was so big she couldn't get out, and she was trying to get out. And the devils walked right up to her. And she says, listen, I've been coming to this church for 40 years, but I've been on your side all the time. And, okay, now, you know what? There might be people like here. I mean, you come here all the time, but you're on the devil's side. And let me tell you something. The devil has big plans for you. You know? But Antiochus Epiphanes, he found some people there in Jerusalem. It says about them, it says in verse 32, and such as do wickedly against the covenant, he shall corrupt by flatteries. There might be some people here, and you're secretly doing some things against the Lord. And the devil says, man, I'm going to have fun with them. The devil comes to him and says, oh, you're such a good person, they should treat you better than this. Come on, I got something for you to do. But that's what Antiochus did. He found some people there in Jerusalem that was going to be on his side. And he was able to take Jerusalem. He went in there. He went to the temple. And he killed a pig on the altar. And he took the pig blood and poured it all over the place. And he put in a statue of his god Jupiter in the temple. And that's what, and now, about 300 years before it happened, it was written in the scriptures, that's what's going to happen. And history said that's what happened in verse 31. An arm shall stand on his side, and he shall pollute the sanctuary of strength. He'll take pig's blood and put it all over the sanctuary, and shall take away the daily sacrifice. They would, twice a day, they would make a sacrifice there. So he says, nope, not that. And he shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. That's exactly what happened. And here it's called the abomination of desolation. Okay, okay, and from verse 30 to verse 35. That's basically what's happening in these four. Now, just watch me as I try to say it. I'll begin with verse 29. At the time appointed, this is the king of that. At the time appointed, he shall return, and at the time appointed, he shall return and come toward the south. But it shall not be after the former manner. For the ships of Kittim shall come against him. Therefore he shall be grieved and return and have indignation against the holy covenant. So shall he do. He shall even return and have intelligence against them that forsake the holy covenant. And an arm shall stand on his side. And he shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and take away the daily sacrifice, and shall place in the sanctuary the abomination. And such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries. But The people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. And they that understand shall instruct many. Yet they shall fall by the sword, and by flame, by captivity, and by spoil many days. And when they shall fall, they shall be holpen with a little help. But many shall cleave to them with flatteries. And some of them of understanding shall fall, to try them and to purge and to make, to try them and to purge and to make them white, even to the time of the end, because it is yet for a time appointed. Now, okay, so that part that we just listened to talked about the abomination of desolation. It happened about 165 BC, before Jesus was born. Now, Jesus knew it happened, of course. And now, Jesus talked about the abomination of the desolation in the future. When Jesus, in Mark chapter 13, says, but when ye shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken about Daniel the prophet, standing where it ought not. So even though these happened before Jesus was born, he says they're going to happen again. And someday, this has not happened yet. And I don't know when it's going to happen, but someday it'll be a repeat in Jerusalem of what happened back then. We've referred to him, the Antichrist. The Antichrist is going to go to Jerusalem. And he's going to walk inside the temple. The Jews have a temple there. And he's going to say, I'm God, and everybody's got to worship me. And then there'll be 3.5 years of terrible things all over the world. Now, beginning with verse 36 all the way to the end, it's talking about something in the future, something that has not happened yet. And talks about the Antichrist, and now it refers to him in verse 36. In the middle of the verse it says, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished. God will let him prosper to a certain extent. He'll be doing wicked things like no one has ever done before. And God will let it go on. Okay, so watch me as I try to say the last part of this chapter. It says, and the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above all gods, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods. And he shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished, for that is determined shall be done. Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women. Neither shall he regard any God, but he shall exalt himself above all. And in his state he shall honor the God of forces. And the God whom his fathers knew shall he honor with gold and silver and with precious stones and pleasant things. That shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory. And he shall cause him to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain. And in the time of the end, the king of the south shall come against him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and horsemen, and with many ships. And he shall enter the countries and overflow and pass over. And he shall enter also into the glorious land. And many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape, even Edom and Moab and the chief of the children of Ammon. And he shall stretch forth his hand upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. But he shall have power over the treasures of Egypt, and over the silver and the gold. And the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury, utterly to take away many. And he shall place the tabernacle of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain. But he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. Now, the last chapter of of Daniel. Okay, the last verse we just listened to tells how that Antichrist will come to his end. He's going to be destroyed. Now, in this next chapter, talks about that. Now, in the book of Revelation, we refer to as the Battle of Armageddon, when Jesus is going to come again, and there's going to be a great battle. And now, in this battle here, it says in verse 2, and many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. There'll be people coming up out of the graves, and some will come to everlasting life. Now, some will come to everlasting shame and contempt. Now, in verse 1, at last part of the verse, it says, thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. God has a book written of those that are saved. And at this last battle, those that are saved, they're going to win. And sometimes they'll even come up out of the grave. But then in verse 4, he says, but thou, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. Now, listen, knowledge is increasing. I heard, back in the 1960s, I heard a preacher preach that if you would take all of human knowledge and put it on a graph, and from the time of Adam and Eve, and it would, how much man knows, it would gradually go up, and at the time of the first atom bomb, it would be about 12 inches high. Just barely they get more and more, and about 1945, it's about 12 inches high. Now, the preacher said this back in the 1960s. He says, now it would be as high as a Washington Monument. Well, that was a long time ago, and you know what? It's a lot higher than that. And knowledge is increasing so much. And now here, the angel told Daniel, Daniel, you keep this stuff sealed up until the time of the end when knowledge shall increase. Oh, the Bible said a long time ago that knowledge would increase, and that's what's happening nowadays. And now, he explains more about this battle that's going on but in the last verse, he says, but go thy way till the end be, for thou shalt rest and stand in thy lot at the end of days. After the battle's all over, he says, Daniel, listen, I've got a special place for you. Now, Daniel had died long before that great battle comes. But he says, you just rest. I have a special place for you. Now, I don't know when the Lord's going to come again. I don't know if it's going to be in the next few years, if it's going to be in 1,000 years. I don't know. But listen, if we can follow the Lord's way now, he knows about that. And there might be some people right here in this room, and he says, man, he'll rise you up, and he says, you know what? I want you to be riding on a white horse right next to me. And there may be some people here that's following the Lord with your whole heart. You're doing what he wants you to do. And he says, you just wait till I come back. I have a special place for you. Now, there may be some people here that says, well, you know what? You did get saved, but I'm awful ashamed of what you're doing. You just, you just have to sit aside and watch us fight the battle, you know. And because he says, man, I'm ashamed that you're around here. But the end conclusion of this chapter is, Lord, we should be like Daniel and serve the Lord. He's got wonderful things for us. Watch me as I try to say chapter 12. And at that time shall Michael stand up, that great prince which standeth for the children of the people. And there shall be a time of great trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. And many that sleep in the dust shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. But thou, O Daniel, shut up the book and seal the words, even to the time of the end. Many shall go to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. Then now Daniel looked, and behold, there stood other two, the one on this side of the bank of the river, and the other on that side of the bank of the river. And the one said to the man clothed in linen which was upon the waters of the river, how long shall it be to the end of these wonders? And I heard the man clothed in linen which was upon the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand unto heaven, and sware by him that liveth forever, that it should be for time and times and a half a time. And when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. And I heard, but I understood not. And then said I, O my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed to the time of the end. Many shall be tried and purified and made white. And the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. From the time that the sanctuary is, from the time that the sanctuary is taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he that waiteth, and cometh to the 1,330 days. But go thy way till the time be, for thou shalt rest, and stand in thy lot at the end of the days. Now, he says, listen, if you just, for the ones that's going to wait, first of all, he said 1,290 days. And then he added about 45 more days to that. He says, those that wait to the 1,330 days, hey, there'll be something special for them. And I don't know what it is, but, you know, it's good if we can just wait for the Lord. Wait for the Lord. Now, I have an idea that there might be some people here that says, man, I got to figure out how to get out of here. And now, if God wants you to be here, just patiently wait for the Lord. And the Bible talks about waiting for the Lord, that you put all your desire upon the Lord. And if you're in a situation that, man, you just can't stand it, can't the Lord be with you there? And if you can learn to say, you know what? This isn't such a bad place. After all, the Lord's with me. And if you can patiently just wait and enjoy the Lord, I don't know how long it's going to be, but he knows how long you are, and he'll have a special thing for you. And he told Daniel, Daniel, when this all comes, I've got a special place for you also.